Discussions with the writer Fred are back with a sheer determination to move forward and discuss some very, very critical issues to the Black community for the rest of this year. 3 of those issues will be discussed today with 3 of my guests, those issues being the coronavirus, impeach Donald Trump, and brutality in our streets perpetrated against our people by the police. Way over what our proportion is in the community. But science will eventually eradicate that. The second enemy is the impeached President Donald Trump, whose rhetoric and hateful speech against our communities for years and our leaders has led us to know that he is not the man that we want to lead in America. And of course, hopefully, the election in November will eradicate him. The third enemy are racist policemen who are supported by racist unions throughout this country that think that they have free reign to kill our kids, and not only our kids, but anyone in the Black community. You all have seen that disgusting picture of that racist cop with his knee in the throat of that Black man who is essentially pleading for mercy. And this guy has his hands in his pockets and continues to do it. And let's not leave out the other 3 cops until the man is dead. That is our third enemy, and unfortunately, that's not one that we have been able to eradicate. That's been with us for years and years. I can go back to the Watts riot in 1965. It was police abuse in the community. Newark in 67, Detroit in 68, Los Angeles in 92. These things have been going on and on and on and on. And so today, I have with me 3 guests who we're going to discuss each one of these crises and see if we can come up with some kind of answer or solution to them. So I have with me Dr. Sharon Michael Chadwell, who's been on my show many times before. She's an outstanding educator here, and she teaches university. We also have Mr. John Sanders, who's been a long time community leader here in San Antonio, and John has taken on many of these same kind of issues well over the years, fighting against police brutality, police shootings. And our third guest is one of our outstanding attorneys, Cleophas Marshall. Welcome to Discussions with the Writer Fred.
Thank you for having us.
So let's get right to it. Let's start with Dr. Chadwell.
Okay.
And let's look at the first enemy, the crisis, coronavirus. Why is it that we have been so susceptible to the disease? Why is that?
Well, first of all, I think we need to go ahead and acknowledge that the coronavirus has pulled the lid, the mask totally off of the injustices, the lack of access to health care, and so much more in this country. One of the things that I have to wonder about the coronavirus and its impact on the Black community, not saying that we have not been affected, is how the numbers and the stats have been developed. Before the coronavirus hit the United States, and we heard very, very little about its impact on Africa. Then it comes into the United States, and then all of a sudden, African Americans, Black Americans are becoming the poster child of the coronavirus. Yeah. And several medical doctors have indicated that they have been incentivized to code everything as related to coronavirus. A person could have knee problems, it's a coronavirus. They could have a heart problem, it's a coronavirus. So I can't help but wonder whether or not we have been used to promote a greater agenda, such as this promotion for a vaccine that's funded by Bill Gates. Are they trying to make it a reason to get us vaccinated quicker than anybody else? So there's a lot of underlying issues related to how we are being affected and whether or not we are truly as effective as the stats say.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sanders,
Yes, sir.
same question, sir.
I think it is a question of our quality of life for many of our citizens, and especially in our highly concentrated urban areas, where they lack the opportunity for options in quality food and the food deserts that exist in our area, fresh fruits, vegetables, quality meats, not a concentration of processed foods that our children are subjected to, and our adults. And of course, this spills over into our ability to work and live in an environment that gives us a healthy opportunity to thrive. Our children who suffer large concentrations of asthma, our inability for many of us to have upward mobility in our lives. We clean up America. We handle the trash of America.
Yes.
We work in the hospitals. We work in sanitation. We work in environmentally vulnerable areas. And we bring these home. And then after a while, our bodies break down and we're more susceptible to strong diseases and viruses. This happens every year during flu season, cold season. We disproportionately suffer. And of course, we have the largest concentration of our family members who are in nursing homes, in prisons, and these kind of areas where people are packed in large concentrations. So we're going to be more susceptible because of the areas and the quality of life that many of our citizens are susceptible to.
Very good, thank you. Attorney Marshall with a great last name.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Those who are most vulnerable in society oftentimes will be affected more disproportionately whenever there is something of the size and nature of this pandemic. And so what it really just does is tells us what we already know, and that is that oftentimes Black and brown people are those who are most vulnerable in society for a number of different reasons, whether it's economic, health-wise, mental status, so on and so forth. There are a lot of ills that plague our communities. And so I am not surprised that when the coronavirus, and more specifically COVID-19, appeared on the scene, that it disproportionately affects our people. I do believe that COVID-19 is real. I believe the coronavirus is real. I've known people to die of it. The very first person in San Antonio to die of coronavirus is a lifetime friend, my neighbor. I've known her for all of my life. Well over 40 years, and she was the very first person to die of the coronavirus. And then I have other family and friends who've had their relatives, sisters, brothers, uncles, who also died of coronavirus. So I know and I believe that it is real. And so, I don't know whether or not somebody's playing around with the numbers, but I do know people are dying. And I do know that it's something that we need to pay attention to. And we should be very specific about how we handle this matter, because it is a very, very serious matter that plagues our people.
When I think about what happens to us, little insurance, living on top of each other in central cities, and exposed to all these different viruses and things. Just quickly, is this a problem with capitalism? Is it the system that keeps us at the bottom all the time? Poverty? Anyone want to respond to that? Please feel free to.
I don't know that it's a problem with capitalism per se. I think that African Americans readily want to engage in the capitalistic experience. I know that my family has taught us very well over the years to educate ourselves and to go out and work and to start your own businesses. And we really do want to plug in to the American dream. However, we do know that in this capitalistic society that we live in, there are winners and losers. And systematically over the years, people of color have been those losers, whether you're Black or brown. And we're talking about systematically over the generations. We're not talking about something that just happened a few minutes ago, a few weeks ago, a few years ago, even decades ago. We're talking about things that are systemic over centuries. And so I think that now, because of everything that is happening, we're in 2020. That's, in eyesight, that's the optimum level of eyesight to have is 2020, but it means things are clearer. And I think that in 2020, with everything that's going on in this year specifically, that we ought to see more clearly now than ever before the great divide that has marginalized the people of color in this country.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Is the question about capitalism?
Yeah, is this a function of capitalism that, capitalism needs the poor. That's understood. And we've always been the target of that poor. Because you just can't, if somebody makes $1 billion, you just can't print another $1 billion
Right.
to balance it out. So if that person makes $1 billion, then that means someone has to go without. And it's always been us. And so I wonder, at some point down the road, are we going to look at capitalism and say, it's not going to work for us? Now, our leaders have done that. Dr. King came to that conclusion. W. Du Bois early on came to that conclusion. A. Philip Randolph came to that conclusion. And the same problems seem to plague us under the same system. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. But if nobody wants to comment, then I'll move on.
Well, I was just going to say, Fred, I don't think necessarily it's the system itself, it's the practice of the system. If I can get 260 years of free labor and accumulate wealth, and as you just said, a billionaire who made $1 billion and why can't we? We're probably the ones who earned that $1 billion for that billionaire. And it's probably off the sweat of our work and our equity that billionaire became a billionaire. That's why these billionaires are so eager to put us back to work. And it doesn't matter what the risk is to our lives. That's capitalism too. That some are, we're going to lose some. Some of y'all are going to die. The strong will survive. That's capitalism too. Some fail, some live. We have to be more inclusive in our concern and our compassion for our fellow man in the condition that capitalism, and that line we used to lose, redlining, whether it's an insurance company, whether it's a bank that perpetrates itself on our communities, that deprives even those of us like Attorney Marshall, Professor, yourself, from getting a loan or anything just because of your zip code. Doesn't matter that you can qualify for it. You have the background for it. You have the credit score for it. You'll be denied just because of the redlining that's perpetrated in capitalism.
You made an interesting point when you said they want to get us back to work. And what I thought about is Mitch McConnell wants legislation says that workers cannot sue the owners if they get sick.
Right.
So they're saying, go back to work.
Right.
You might get the virus, but you're not going to be able to sue your owner.
Right.
That is all directed at the people that run this country, the billionaires.
Right.
So, but we can move on.
May I add something to that? I am not an opponent of capitalism, but I am an opponent of inequality, and I'm an opponent of injustice. And whenever there's inequality and there's injustice, any system, whether it's capitalism or otherwise, will not work. And so I think, again, that people of color definitely want to be part of the American dream. And we definitely want to plug into the American dream and go out and work and start our businesses and so on and so forth. But we don't want to be hampered by inequality, and we don't want to be disproportionately affected by injustice. And so if you can remove those evils and any other ills that would hamper and hinder our progress, then I believe we will swing for the fences. We want to hit home runs as well. We want to hit grand slams. So I just think that get the obstacles out of our way. And I think more importantly, it's time for us to educate ourselves and empower ourselves so that we can remove those obstacles out of the way. And the best way to do that is to vote.
Great. Okay, we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll get right into the second enemy, and that's the man or I hate to call him a man, the person sitting in the White House. We'll be right back with you.
1, 6, or a dozen trees, no job is too big or too small. Booker's Tree Services is a certified arborist and state licensed company. On the ground or in the air, we are here to take care of all your tree needs, from stump grinding, tree pruning, tree trimming, tree removal, and much more. Call the professionals to help manage your commercial or residential needs. Don't let your trees make you nervous. Call for a free estimate today at Booker Tree Service, 210-657-8085.
40% of food in America is never eaten.
1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation.
America, let's do lunch.
Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.
Hello, I'm Tony Hendricks, Chief Operating Officer at Lewis Funeral Home. Lewis Funeral Home has been serving San Antonio and surrounding areas for over 100 years. Lewis Funeral Home's ultimate goal is to help those families in their time of need. If your family is ever in need, please feel free to call us at Lewis Funeral Home, 210-227-7281, or check us out on our website at lewisfuneralhome.com.
Does your life matter? Education, health, and finance can determine your future and explain your past. Pick up the latest edition of Black Life Texas Magazine, a monthly outlook on life with an African American focus. Life is what you make it, so live it in the black.
One in 3 adults has prediabetes. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Nothing to do this week? Don't miss another event. Go to blacksinsanantonio.com for our event calendar. The home of the largest business directory in San Antonio with an African American focus. Sign up today for our weekly e-blast and text message alerts. Help us make this a better community. Connect, empower, grow.
Welcome back to Discussion with the Writer Fred, right here, Black Video News, San Antonio, Texas. Dr. Shadwell, you wanted to comment on our last discussion, so go right ahead.
You know, when you think about this coronavirus and what it has done, what it has exposed, my greatest concern now is for the generation behind us. What they are experiencing is a severe dream deferred. If you think about the fact that, look at the high school and college graduations. These kids have worked hard to achieve the goals that they have, only to have their dreams deferred. They don't know if they can get a job. They don't know where they can get a job. So the coronavirus has done some serious damage, not only for all communities, but I feel for the Black community in particular.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, let's move on. That should be good.
You think so?
The second enemy. The second enemy. Now, this is not Black Video News. This is Discussions with the Writer Fred. And so attack me, not Carl Booker and Black Video News. That is, I'm saying our second enemy is the impeached Trump in the White House. And it is imperative that we get rid of that man
I agree.
for the betterment of not only our race, but the country and the world. So let's go to the other side and start with Attorney Marshall. You wanna talk on that for a minute or so?
Yes, I will comment on it. First of all, I respect people's right to have a different opinion. One of the things that I learned in law school, our professor would always say, right is right, it doesn't matter if no one is doing it, and wrong is wrong, it doesn't matter if everyone is doing it. And so I think that as it relates to Donald Trump, number 45, that we have to begin to look at not only what he is doing, but really try to see the heart of the man and see what the motivation is. So some of my friends, and I will say this, and I'm talking to some of those who may be on the fence saying, really, what have Democrats done for us? What has Joe Biden done for us? Why should we vote in the Democratic Party? Why not take a chance on Donald Trump? Donald Trump himself said, you know, what can you lose? Well, I think that we are finding out disproportionately because of COVID-19, we can lose our lives. And definitely we have disproportionately lost our jobs as well. But when you think back with regard to Trump and all the things that he has done, you start back with the birther issue as it related to Obama and how he was part of the rallying cry against Obama. You look at him trying to single-handedly dismantle every single thing that President Obama did while he was in office. And some would say, especially those in our community, some would say, and millennials in our community would say, well, Obama didn't do enough. But you have to recall that in 2008, I believe well over 90% of those African Americans who voted in that election voted for President Obama. And in 2008, he won. The Congress was under him. He had the Congress, the representatives and the Senate were with him, and we were able to get Obamacare. But in 2010, because of the Tea Party and so much rhetoric, so many African Americans didn't vote in 2010, and so many people stayed at home. And what happened was that he lost the Congress, and because he lost the Congress, then he was not able to accomplish the things that he would have liked to have accomplished. So before you begin to say that it's the Democratic Party and what has Obama done for us and what has the Democratic Party done for us, you might want to look at the person in the mirror and say, did I go out and vote? Did I maintain a well understanding of what was going on? Did I educate myself? Did I tell my friends and family to vote? Did I pick somebody up and take them to the polls? Because if you have not done all that you can do to make sure that we have the people in office, not just on the federal level, but we have the people in office even in our local community that can help our cause, then really you are unfortunately part of the problem. Begin to be part of the solution.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sanders.
Yes, sir. I would just say, just poignantly, Fred, that presently this president is in the process of trying to put our U.S. military on the streets of America. I think his attempt to get us prepared to try to establish martial law before the election, and may even attempt to try to postpone this election, is not far-fetched. And I think anyone who give Donald Trump a chance, Obama didn't do enough for us, is someone who lacks a civic education of what Obama did do, not under the guise of this is just for black people, because it never would have passed a Congress or a Senate to become a law. We also need the majority leader of the Senate. We need a majority in the Senate. We need a Congress. We need our Congress people, and we need state people down the line to be elected to make a president or the agenda of our community effective. And so it's not just looking at one person in a savior syndrome and then attacking them if you didn't get what you thought you wanted, and not understanding how the system works and how it happens. Because many of us were responsible for not getting what we wanted because we did not participate at the critical time to make sure it could happen.
Right, definitely. Dr. Shadwell.
We're in dangerous times. We've got someone who is using the United States as if it is a huge plantation and he's the slave master. And I have to agree with what Mr. Sanders says, that I truly believe he is also trying to use this martial law threat as a means of slowing down or postponing the election in November. Because there's always been indicators prior to Corona that he was going to try to do something. And now the coronavirus and these protests has given him the opportunity to, quote unquote, justify the need to hold everybody at bay, at home, keep them at home. He's already trying to dismantle the U.S. postal system, a la we're trying to do voting by mail.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
These are moves that, if you just watch it and see how these dominoes are lining up, these are moves to delay, postpone, or not even have an election. He doesn't want to get out the White House. So let's just talk about if we do have an election and he does lose, what will we be facing in November? And I think the fact that if Biden wins and he doesn't leave that White House, we're going to see a bigger protest.
I agree with you. Let me just add, what's happening is Trump has found his little group of Negroes. He met with them in Atlanta, and their marching orders is to discourage blacks not to vote, because his folks know there's no way he's going to get the black vote. But if he can discourage blacks from vote by attacking Biden, and you see all the stuff on Facebook now about, well, what's the Democrats ever done for you? And was a Republican who freed the slaves, which is questionable. All this other stuff that they're doing now because they don't want you to vote.
Right.
They don't want you to vote. Folks, in Michigan, Trump won by 11,000 votes. Detroit alone, they say over 100,000 blacks didn't vote. Can you see what's going on there? Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, these states that put him over the top. If we vote, it will make a difference. And I'm committed now until the election. If my producer over there will allow me on this show to continue to push this whole idea that they don't want us to vote, and don't fall for that stuff you're seeing on Facebook about how terrible the Democratic Party is, and they're the party of the Ku Klux Klan, and they're the party of racism, and the Congressional Black Caucus are not leaders. You're getting just a ton of that stuff, and you can't let it affect you. So that's my little say so on that subject. So let's go on to our third subject. We know our first two enemies, we believe, will be eradicated. We truly believe Trump's going to lose. The third one is one that goes on much longer. I mean, the first two, coronavirus has been around for maybe 5 months. Trump's been around for 3 years. Police brutality's been around for decades, forever. So my question to you all, and we'll start with John this time, because I know he has a great deal of involvement here in San Antonio over the years with police brutality. And so, John, may I ask you, sir, what are we going to do? How are we going to take on this monster?
Well, Fred, one of my suggestions, the template that we had some years ago was, of course, you have the emotional reaction and the visceral reaction that we have for what we saw when we become knowledgeable of what is taking place of demonstration and protest. But you have to have an organized effort to deal with and meet with and discuss with public policy, the policymakers on all levels, the people in our cities, on city council level, our state representatives on the state level, and other people to formulate the answer to the problem. As you know, some years ago, one of the things that came out of our efforts after a number of incidences here in San Antonio was the Citizens Review Board. Mm-hmm. The thing we fought for that we did not get, that we knew what was critical for it to be actually successful, other than just to be another activity in place, was to have subpoena power. Well, of course, the powers that be, the police union, the police force, and those who supported the police in those efforts, of course, fought against that. We did get to establish that, but we did not get the subpoena. And you have to, if you're going to have a citizen review board or any kind of check and balance on police activity, you have to have the ability to hold police officers accountable.
Yes, yes. By the way, as an aside, I'm on that board right now.
Amen.
And I can attest to what John is saying. It's really difficult to get anything done when the people involved don't even have to show up when we hold the hearings. But okay, let's move on. Dr. Shadwell, you want to take that on?
Sure. Police use of deadly force, police abuse. Yes, this has been going on for some time. And again, I have to agree with Mr. Sanders that we've got to work with policymakers in terms of trying to figure out ways of getting these police officers become more accountable, to include the unions. One of the bills that was brought to my attention that they arrived dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate is the Walter Scott Notification Act of 2017. And so one of the things that I have been trying to push through my Facebook page as well as LinkedIn is that as citizens, we need to contact our U.S. senators and ask them to bring that bill back to the floor and vote on it, because there is some financials also attached to that bill, to where if police organizations and states do not start reporting the stats on police use of deadly force, they start losing funding. So there are already bills out there that just will not be allowed to be brought to the floor, that we as citizens need to find out what those are and start pushing for certain bills to be enacted at the federal level, as well as start getting closer to our local levels as well.
And that's why voting in November is so important. And that's why from this day on until the election, discussions with the writer Fred is going to stress we have to vote. So let's turn to Attorney Marshall, who the legal mind here, and can definitely add something to this discussion.
Thank you very much. Just recently, in response to the George Floyd murder, I heard the Minneapolis, Minnesota police chief say, in speaking to the Floyd family, that all those officers who were there did not assist Mr. Floyd, were complicit in his murder. And although only one has been charged, arrested so far, and charged with murder, I believe that all at some point will be held accountable. But notice that police chief is African American, or appears to be African American. And I've heard other police chiefs around the country who may have been black or brown say similar things. And it's important that we have people of color in these very important positions, not just as police chief, but also as district attorneys, also as state's attorneys, also as prosecutors, also in any number of different areas of the justice system. So it goes back again to us as a people having people in the right place. I've tried a lot of cases. I've tried everything from capital murder to aggravated robbery to, any number of things. I've actually represented a peace officer who was accused of murder. Interestingly enough, he was an African American person. He was arrested, forthrightly charged, fired from his job, and he had to face a murder trial. We were successful in that trial, but I don't think that it had anything to do with his color as to why we were successful. But in looking at the entire issue, I think we as African Americans or colored people also have to be willing to serve on juries. So often we, talk about what the verdict was in a trial, but a lot of times when I'm there and we're picking a jury, so often African Americans or people of color are looking for reasons to get off of the jury. I think that we have to stop doing that. We have to educate ourselves about what it means to be a juror. And I'm not saying that because you are African American, if there's somebody that's African American on trial, you ought to find them not guilty simply because they're African American. That's foolishness. But I think that we should educate ourselves to be willing to be on these juries, to listen to all of the evidence and have our own conviction and stand to it. So often I see people in these trials where they are afraid because maybe there's an African American or brown person that's on trial and they're the only African American or brown person on the jury. So they don't want to say anything because they don't want to feel like I'm just finding this person not guilty because they are of my same color. When people who are not of our color don't feel that way, they will, stand by their conviction, even if there tends to be a reasonable doubt in the case. So I think that as it relates to police brutality specifically, that we need to hold people accountable. And I want to share a story with you of my own experience, and then I'll be done. I won't take up all the time. But when I was a child, when I was a teenager, I happened to be stopped by the police. I was riding along in the vehicle with my cousin. We had just come from a friend's house.
You care to tell us the time?
The time was in
the city.
The city, I apologize. The city was San Antonio.
Okay.
San Antonio, Texas. I'm from San Antonio. And so we were actually at Vacation Bible School, and during the break at Vacation Bible School, we went over to a friend's house. I was going to ask her to the prom. She did, in fact, go with me to the prom. But when we were coming back to the church, we were stopped by the police. And the police got us out of the car, said that we fit the description of some people who had just robbed an ice house. Of course, we didn't rob an ice house. They also said that the car that we were driving in was not ours. We must have stolen it. It belonged to my cousin's mother. And the people from the church were about 2 blocks away. They saw what happened. So while the police officers are talking to us, they don't realize that the congregation from the church is walking down the street to interact with them. But during the time that the congregation was walking down the church and I was talking to the police officer asked me if I played any sports in school. I told him I ran track, played baseball, football. He asked me if in a race that I think I could beat him to the corner. And I would love to tell you that I had the kind of legal mind that I have right now and said no. But I just simply said no because I didn't understand really what he meant by that. And I just said I wouldn't want to race you to the corner. But having been an experienced prosecutor for almost a decade, having been a defense attorney, criminal defense attorney for longer than that, having served in this area of law for nearly 25 years, now I realize had I run thinking I'm racing that officer at that time, he would have chased me down, knocked me to the ground, and at minimum said I was evading detention or evading arrest, or in some way I was committing an act that showed that I was guilty of the crime for which he allegedly stopped me. And he probably would have beaten me up. And can you imagine me going to court and in court saying the officer asked me to race him down the street? You know how foolish I would have looked, and nobody would have believed me. And so whenever I became a prosecutor, when defendants came in and said that there was some type of police brutality or some type of inequality, or they were stopped because they were black, I would always give a listening ear to that. I would not always agree with the defendant, but I would give a serious listening ear. And there was one time when a police officer who was accused by someone of being racist would not shake my hand, and I was the prosecutor. And I knew at that moment that what that defendant was saying likely was true. And it just so happened that the judge in that case, who's now gone on, Judge Barlow, he granted the defendant's motion for suppression, and that case was thrown out. But it takes us being aware, being alert, being vigilant, and willing to stand up for what is right, and as African Americans being accountable. And I'll end with this. Do not be afraid to say when you have been brutalized or when you have been hurt. Speak up, speak out, shout it from the mountaintop. Let people know how you feel, and let your non-black and white friends know how you feel so that they may have empathy for you as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the problem is mindset, and I don't know how you deal with that. You have a young white kid that grows up in a family where there's no respect for blacks. In fact, the operable word in that family is the N-word. In this, in that, in this. And he then becomes a policeman. And that's the mentality he takes on to the police force. And seems to me the police department, when these guys go through training, They need to come up with a much more rigorous test to try to weed those kind of people out, I believe, because we know they are entrenched in the police departments, because this stuff keeps happening, and one of these times, and I think we may be getting closer to that day, black folks just not going to take it. I keep reflecting back on James Baldwin's final words, and one of his books was "No More Water, the Fire Next Time," and he was prophesizing, if you don't get this straight, this country's going to go up in flames. And I thought about that as I saw all the fires that were taking place. These young blacks, they're not taking this stuff anymore. The older generations like me, we fought back, but not to the point where they're willing to fight. Power is only good if the people you use power over have a threat, and that threat is death. But let me tell you, once they don't fear death no more, you've lost that power.
Right.
And I see we're moving towards that in this country. And these police departments, they really better try to get a hold on that.
Can I add something very quickly?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
I think that police officers, when they take their oath, they should add something to that, where they will say that they will not be complicit with other police officers who commit police brutality. And I'll add very quickly to that. Also, when the people like coroners or medical examiners come into the picture, or people who do the GSR, gunshot residue test, for instance, come into the picture, you have to watch for how they testify, because they will testify in such a way to make it appear that either a police officer is not guilty or a citizen who was arrested illegally is in fact guilty. And so the entire system has to be overhauled, and that really comes, Fred, with education.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's wrap this up. Each person, start over here with you, Doctor. Take a minute to assess where are we and where are we going.
We are in a position to where it's do or die. We're in a do or die situation, and again, our generation behind us, they have no fears of doing or dying. So either the nation as a whole will have to either do something, or sadly, there's going to be more people that die, greater than what Corona can do.
Yes. Okay. John, Mr. Sanders.
If I could just piggyback, I want to thank Attorney Marshall for his bringing us into the courtroom, and I just want to add that element of when there is a trial of police officers who have done these type of atrocities in our community, we also have to be willing to go and sit in that trial. We did that in years past en masse. We need to be present throughout the trial. The attorneys, the judge, the jury needs to see the concern of the community, that we show up throughout the whole process, not just protesting in the street. And I think the table is set. I think the professor is right. This is a very critical time. And this is not a time for the generation behind us to sit out. And I think, as it has been said before, if all of Black America started going to the gun shop and purchasing firearms, the gun laws would change.
Attorney Marshall, you have to take a minute to wrap up.
Martin Luther King marched, Rosa Parks sat, Colin Kaepernick kneeled, all in peaceful protest. And Martin Luther King was killed. Colin Kaepernick has not played in an NFL game basically since he left the San Francisco 49ers. Those messages have been marginalized. And I believe in peaceful protest, but power concedes nothing without a demand. And we as a people have to be willing to fight the powers that be. Amen. And that doesn't mean throwing a brick through a window or looting someone's store. But that does mean, as Dr. King talked about, getting into the sweltering heat and dealing with injustice and not accepting tomorrow as the answer, or simply be peaceful as the answer. Sometimes you have to yell, sometimes you have to scream, sometimes you have to kick, because people do not seem to understand when you simply speak calmly. So it's okay to yell, it's okay to scream. Let people know by any means necessary how you feel. As a people, obey the law. We believe in being law-abiding, but at the same time, challenge the laws that be if those laws are not for you and me. And that's my point.
Thank you all. Let me wrap up with my comments to white America. Stokely Carmichael said, nonviolence only works if you're dealing with people with a conscience. And too many of you out there don't have a conscience that works to help us. Because when these police do this, you sit by or you go on Facebook and you try to make justification for what they did. These young kids are not going to take this. They're not going to take this. They have a different way of looking at life, folks. Let me tell you, a lot of our 21-year-old kids don't even think they're going to make it to 30. So what the heck do they care about the police? That's a bad situation, but they're willing to die. And let me tell you one other thing. You can outgun us and you can outman us, but black people could bring this country to its knees. You don't want that. We don't want that. No one on this panel wants that. And we're going to do our part to try and make sure that doesn't happen. We're really asking you to do your part. Stop this police brutality. We are not going to sit around and watch policemen put their knees in black folks' necks and kill them. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And you better really understand that fact. And hopefully, as we move forward, we'll find a way to work together. In the meantime, this is Discussions with the Writer Friend, telling our story, our way, and I mean it.